Good evening, everyone. By now, all of you know that 14 senior anchors have been banned by the opposition alliance that calls itself India. They have done so because they say these anchors are biased. They spew venom every evening. And that we, that is the opposition, don't want to legitimize their hate-fueled agendas on prime time. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm no fan of their journalism. It's not called journalism. But a ban goes against the very spirit of India's hard-earned democracy. If you don't like what anchors say on prime time, strengthen your debates, strengthen your vocal cords. A ban is a bad idea. It's a more benign version of throttling free speech. And if the opposition is guilty of it, so is the BJP. This is no monkey balancing act. Take a look at what has happened in the Supreme Court. The Manipur government has filed an FIR against 4 members of the Editors Guild of India for their report, which called the leadership's response to the ethnic violence partisan. Essentially saying that Biren Singh acted in a partisan manner when the ethnic violence was playing out. The Manipur government said that the report was biased against the government. Today, the Supreme Court asked the complainant a very simple and logical question. The Supreme Court said there are incorrect statements made by journalists across the country. Will you prosecute them all? The Supreme Court refused to let the journalists be arrested and extended their protection. There were more stingers that the complainant had to face today from the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court said that the crime of promoting enmity between groups mentioned in the Manipur police's FIR against these journalists does not appear to be made out. Seriously, are you trying to say that the ethnic violence in Manipur is happening because of what these journalists put in their report? The report came much later. Manipur had been burning for 2 months already by then. The court also wondered how merely giving a report could constitute a crime. A bench of Chief Justice of India, D.Y. Chandrachud, and Justices J.B. Pardiwala and Manoj Misra said, and I'm quoting them now because I don't want to get this wrong, prima facie, the crime mentioned in the FIR does not appear to be made out. There is no whisper of offence in the complaint based on which this FIR has been registered. The Chief Justice of India has also questioned the absence of essential elements which are needed to prove charges under Section 153A. What is Section 153A? Ladies and gentlemen, 153A essentially deals with offences that relate to creating enmity amongst groups. The complainant was asked to respond to as to why these FIRs should not be quashed. Just to give you a little background of the case, a case had been filed against 3 members of the Editors Guild fact-finding team who had gone to Manipur to assess the media's reportage of the ethnic conflict in the state as well as the Editor Guild's president. The complainant, and the complainants are many, there are private individuals, there's the Manipur police as well, they had alleged that the report submitted by the team was, and I quote, false, fabricated and sponsored. Today, the Supreme Court extended by 2 weeks the protection from coercive action it had granted to 4 Editor Guild members who are named in the FIR. Essentially, it means for the next 2 weeks, even if the Manipur police wants to arrest these 4, they cannot do that. The Supreme Court has given them protection. The people on your screens are the people against whom, are the journalists against whom these FIRs have been lodged by the Manipur police. My guests this evening have been journalists for a very, very long time. Neeraja Chaudhary is a senior journalist. You all know her. She's here on the show very often. We have Jaideep Mazumdar, who's an author, who is a columnist as well. And Sanjeev Srivastav is a senior journalist. Thank you. Thank you all very much for being here. Jaideep Mazumdar, I'm going to come to you first. The Supreme Court very crucially also says today, your entire complaint, and they're saying this to the complainant, your entire complaint is a counter-narrative of the government. Has what the Supreme Court observed today an embarrassment for the Manipur government?
I didn't get your question, Shreya. You were breaking off. Can you repeat that, please?
Okay. Okay. Yes, I can repeat that question for you. I'm just going to quote the Supreme Court of India, Jaideep Mazumdar. What the Supreme Court of India has told the complainant in the Manipur FIR case is this: your entire complaint is a counter narrative of the government. All of these are just observations, by the way. I just want to make that very clear. But the Supreme Court has said your entire complaint is a counter narrative of the government. Is this, or is it not, an embarrassment to the Manipur government? Because everyone is seeing what this FIR was all about. It's very transparent, very clear, even to the Supreme Court.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, with due respect to the Supreme Court, it has made a grave error in making such observations and extending protection to this team, which went to Manipur. 3.5 days, it found out everything. It went into the so-called truth of what had happened. It was an army-sponsored visit, and the army it wrote whatever the army fed to it. There are lots of glaring inaccuracies in that report, and I think the Supreme Court should have taken cognizance of all the inaccuracies of the partisan slant of the report that was prepared by the Editors Guild of India.
But Jaideep Mazumdar, where is the criminality? I'm not the only one asking this question. The Supreme Court today has asked that question as well. They are saying, and I'm going to quote two statements that the court has made. Give me a minute. I'll quote two statements by the court, and I'll seek a response from you. They say making a false statement in an article is not an offence of 153A, which means promoting enmity between different groups. All right, that's the first thing they say. The second thing that the Supreme Court is saying is incorrect statements are made by journalists across the country. Will you prosecute them all? Where is the criminality? You can call them biased. I have no objection to that. But where is the criminality?
In this particular case, I'm not talking about if it's a different sort of a crime in an ordinary circumstances. If a reporter makes a mistake, that's okay. That is a different matter at all. But here we have a grave ethnic strife where people are getting killed every day. Now, if a body like the editor, and this is not just one newspaper or one journalist, one reporter, doing some wrong reporting or making up stories. Here we have a respectable body like the Editors Guild of India making out a report, and which is a very one-sided, biased report that will definitely, and that has in fact created a lot of problems in Manipur. It has there have been protests in Manipur because by the Meiteis, by many Meitei organizations, and in fact, such sort of a report has the potential to add fuel to the fire and to accentuate the strife out there, the divide.
Jaideep, but the ethnic violence in Manipur had been raging on for 3 months before the Editors Guild team even stepped in the state of Manipur. How can you blame them for the ethnic violence that has killed over 200 people? I mean, if there is accountability that needs to be sought, it doesn't need to be sought from these journalists. It needs to be sought from the Chief Minister who has presided over this mayhem. He is the one who needs to answer questions, not the Editors Guild of India.
I am not defending the Chief Minister, and I have said in Mirror now, as well as other channels, that the Chief Minister is to blame. The Manipur police cannot be absolved of guilt. I have said that very, very openly and very frankly. But here, in this particular case, no one is blaming the Editors Guild of India for the violence that has happened all these months and which is still continuing. What I am saying, my simple point is, where is the criminality, you ask? And the criminality is this, that in such a situation, if an organization like the Editors Guild of India goes and conducts a so-called inquiry, which is the sham of an inquiry, and which has the potential, and which not only has the potential, which has actually increased tensions and increase the strife out there, led to more protests, etc. I think that that is a criminal act in itself. Apart from it being a very unethical
what is in
thing
my
that the
mind
Editors Guild of
also
India has done.
Okay, in my mind, in my view, what is criminal is trying to throttle a free press and trying to intimidate them. My own reading of the situation is that that is exactly what the Manipur government was trying to do. Neeraja Chaudhary, please come in here and respond to what Jaideep Mazumdar is saying. He's like, if this was a young cub reporter who had gone and got his or her facts wrong, that was another thing. These are senior journalists. They got their facts wrong, and they got one fact wrong, Neeraja Chaudhary. I think they have accepted it, and all of us need to accept that for one photograph where it was shown that a house was burning, it was said incorrectly by the Editors Guild report, in the Editors Guild report, that this house belonged to a cookie individual. Turns out it did. It was a Forest Department guest house. That was a mistake that was made. It was a factual mistake that was made. I ask, where is the criminality? Jaideep Mazumdar says the criminality is that these are not young cub reporters. These are senior seasoned journalists. They go there and send out a biased report. It has the potential to spark further violence. Do you buy that?
Look, I think it shows how very difficult it has become today for media to do its job. Because the situation is so polarized across the country, in Manipur, for a senior delegation of media people to go and report fairly. And you're right, they got the facts wrong, they admitted it, and the situation should have moved on instead of getting caught in this, impasse that we see today, and more than an impasse. What is very worrying is the message that is coming through. If you don't give our version, if you don't go by our version, then there'll be an FIR, you will be penalized. And that penalized is not going to be in the court of public opinion. Okay, you say Editors Guild got it wrong, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is where your facts were wrong. Let people decide the credibility of editors' opinions, the Editors Guild report. That's one way to do it. That's the way things have functioned in the past. But to say, if you get one fact wrong, and the fact is, whose house is it? And you're going to get an FIR slapped on. How is the media going to function? This is a message to the rest of the media. Anybody else who comes, that's fact-finding, reports against us, this is going to be what you will be faced with. So, it's a very worrying thing that's happened. And I'm extremely happy that the Supreme Court has given relief and has raised the questions that you have talked about. Because how is the media going to function in a parliamentary democracy like ours, of which we are very proud?
We are proud, but we know that there is pressure. There is pressure from both sides. If there is pressure from the government and the BJP, there is pressure on the other hand from the opposition as well. Look at what India has done, banning 14 primetime anchors. If what the Manipur government is doing is anti-democratic, Sanjeev Srivastava, so is what the India opposition has done. But for the moment, I just want to focus on Manipur. I just want to ask you what you make of the comments by the Supreme Court, and why what has happened with editors and journalists in Manipur is so dangerous. Because here it is not just one section of journalists who are being accused of being biased, which is the Editors Guild. There is another section of journalists in Manipur who are being accused of being biased. That's the local media. The army's problem with the local media was, and they've said this openly in the letter that they wrote to the Editors Guild, is that it was very one-sided. The reportage was very one-sided.
So, Shreya, very good evening. And for one, I'm in complete agreement with whatever Neerja said. And two, I'm aghast at the manner in which my fellow panelists commented that it is a grave error of the Supreme Court. So now we have on TV shows pointing out grave errors of Supreme Court. So where are we headed? I think we should exercise more caution even in such debates. So that is a Supreme Court observation, which is the highest court in the land, and which still has and I think we should all respect it. So Supreme Court, it is Supreme Court's observation, and like Nija said, okay, so they made a mistake, they owned it up. There may be other mistakes in the report, but let's just move on. You point out the mistakes, the matter would have ended there. But now everything is just so combative and polarized that you already know that certain institutions, and I'll not mince my words, Editors Guild is known to have a particular point of view on how the country's politics is running right now. So the government has a chip on its shoulder, so they are antagonistic. So is Press Club of India is antagonistic somewhere. So these issues have come to the forefront only in the last few years, since 2014. So there were occasional rub-ins and there were occasional flashpoints, but now there is almost a continuous flashpoint. No month passes when you don't see a flashpoint between a group of journalists, one journalist, and the government, the powers that be. So that is particularly worrying. And again, I completely agree with Nija. How can the press function? So yes, one thing we must all agree is there is nothing like objectivity. Everybody, there are very few, you can count them on your fingertips, really objective journalists. And I don't even know how can you define that objectivity? Because when we started journalism, the issue was that you have to be neutral, you have to present both sides of the story, you have to be unbiased, non-partisan. Now you are either batting from this side or that side. So that applies on 90% of the press. And that's also a truth. So it's become very difficult, but at least let's not slap cases of criminality and FIRs and threaten journalists with jail, even if you don't like their point of view or even their reportage or the manner in which they put out facts. So it's very worrying and distressing. And again, so on the one hand, we say Supreme Court's grave error of judgment. On the other hand, we are also calling out names to army. So two of the most venerated institutions of the country, suddenly both army and the Supreme Court is in the dock from a certain perspective. Again, very worrying. The issue is we should let things just die their natural death. Something is reported, it's accepted by some, rejected by others, and let's move on. Editors Guild of India's report is a report. It has no constitutional validity, or you really don't have to act and decide and take action based on that. It's not a Supreme Court order.
Okay, Jaideep Mazumdar, would you want to respond to what Sanjeev Srivastava has said? That you are bringing into question what the Supreme Court has said. You are bringing into question, why the army wanted to call the Editors Guild of India. The army is saying that the reportage that was coming out of Manipur was completely biased. Completely biased. We needed independent journalists to come in and show us the real picture.
Two things out here, Shreya. One is that the Supreme Court is not infallible. I think that a lot of judges have made it very clear that we are open to criticism. One, so you can criticize the Supreme Court. It has to be done in a respectable, honorable way. Two, I don't think many people have really gone through the Editors Guild of India report. I have gone through it very, very closely, and I know I can say it with absolute certainty that it's an absolutely biased partisan report. Mr. Srivastava out here raised the point about the army, and I have written about this also. The army is, why fingers are being pointed at the army is because the army is supposed to come to the aid of civilian authorities. The army's mandate is very clear. The army has no business, and I'm stressing this, the army has zero business in inviting the Editors Guild of India to come, hosting them and feeding them, with one-sided facts and biased reports. And this so-called, which is a sham of a fact-finding report, ultimately comes out. That is why fingers are being pointed at the army in Manipur. The army had no business. And if at all the army had to complain, in fact, it should have gone to the Press Council of India. Who is the Editors Guild of India? Does it have any status quo? Is the Press Council of India they should have complained to. But anyway, it's not the army's job to complain about. Have we seen that in the past? The army doing it? We have never seen it in the past. And any bias reporting does not hamper the functioning of the army. The so-called bias reporting of the Meitei media, as the Editors Guild of India has termed the valley-based reportage.
So, Jaideep, here's the thing. I have read the entire report, and Neerija has read the entire report as well. But I won't, I'll just let Neerija respond to what you're saying. Neerija, go ahead. The point that it really is not the army's business, to call journalists to report from any situation. That, and I think that is a valid point. But second to what Jaideep is saying, that if the report is so biased, the Manipur government does reserve the right to act in the way it wants to. Now, I don't agree at all with the way they have acted. You cannot criminalize journalism, even if you feel that report was extremely biased. You can't penalize them, and you can't slap the sort of sections that you have slapped on them. I mean, how is a report causing enmity between two communities? That enmity had been caused a long time ago, and it festered under the rule of Biren Singh, who continues to be Chief Minister, just by the way.
I think, the government has a right to raise the questions that are now Mr. Mazumdar is raising. Should the army call a group of fact-finding journalists to do a report? Does the army have that right to do so? It's a valid question, as you say. It should be raised. The government side has the right to say this report is rubbish for reasons A, B, C, D, E, F, G. It has the right to say that our view has not been fairly represented. It has the right to say that. But as a response to say, we will do an FIR against journalists doing their job. You may disagree with their finding. You may think they've not come up to scratch. You may think they lack credibility. Fair enough. But to slap a case against them, how is the media going to function? Or is the media only supposed to do propaganda either for the government or the opposition? That's not our role. We may not be doing
Absolutely.
our role perfectly.
I think that, yeah.
But that doesn't mean we should not be allowed to do
we certainly
perform our role.
That's the worry, that we are not doing our jobs perfectly. There is a problem within the media, and I think we, Sanjeev Srivastava, I don't have too much time, but 20 seconds, we need to accept that as well. There is a deep problem within the profession of journalism as well, that people have taken sides, and those sides are so polarized that if you try and be neutral, readers don't want to read you and viewers don't want to see you.
But that is the truth, Shreya. I have already said it, that the media itself is so polarized. Media is as polarized as our polity today. And the one thing, since I have just 20 seconds, I'll say, we all grew up thinking that media is the watchdog of the government. What we have been seeing for the last few years, the media is the watchdog of the opposition. So most of the questions directed towards the opposition, not to the government.
Yeah, yes. We need to introspect as well. And more importantly, the Manipur government needs to introspect and see if they want to withdraw this FIR, in which the Supreme Court itself is finding absolutely no merit. We'll see how this case progresses. Thank you very much. Thank you, Neerija Chaudhary, for joining us. Jaideep Mazumdar, thank you very much. And Sanjeev Srivastava, thank you very much as well. On that note, I'm slipping into a quick break on the show. There's much more news coming up on the other side. Do stay with us.